My name is Martha, and I'm 34 years old. 3 years ago, I thought I knew what family meant. I was a night shift nurse at Phoenix General Hospital, raising my 17-year-old daughter Emma alone after my husband Frank died in a car accident. Life wasn't easy, but I believed family was everything. I trusted my mother Dolores and my younger sister Beverly with my life, with Emma's life. I planned what I thought would be a healing family camping trip to the Sonoran Desert for Emma's birthday. I wanted us all to bond, to understand each other better. But sometimes the people who share your blood can be the most dangerous ones in your life. Before I tell you this story, let me know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe, because trust me, this is a story that will change how you look at family forever. I should have seen the warning signs earlier, but love makes you blind to the cruelest truths. As a night shift nurse at Phoenix General Hospital, I spent my days sleeping and my evenings getting Emma ready for school before heading to work. Emma was everything to me. She was a straight-A student, brilliant and independent, planning to follow in my footsteps and study medicine. But she had a strong personality, something that constantly clashed with my mother Dolores and my sister Beverly. Dolores was 62, a harsh woman who believed children should be seen and not heard. She'd raised me with strict discipline, and she couldn't understand why I gave Emma more freedom to express herself. "You're too soft on that girl," she'd tell me constantly. "She needs to learn respect." Beverly, my 29-year-old sister, had never had children of her own. She'd always been jealous of the attention Emma and I received from our mother, and she seemed to take every opportunity to criticize my parenting. The tension had been building for months. Every family gathering became a battlefield. Dolores would critique Emma's clothes, her posture, the way she spoke. "In my day, young ladies knew how to behave," she'd say, her eyes cold as ice. Beverly would nod along, adding her own pointed comments about today's generation and how spoiled Emma was. Emma tried to stay respectful, but I could see the hurt in her eyes every time they spoke to her, like she was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. She'd come to me afterward asking why Grandma and Aunt Beverly didn't like her. I'd make excuses, telling her they just expressed love differently, that they meant well. Looking back, I was protecting the wrong people. When Emma's 17th birthday approached, I made a decision that would haunt me. I suggested a family camping trip to the Sonoran Desert, a place Frank and I used to visit when we were first married. "It'll be good for us," I told Emma, though she looked skeptical. "We need to spend time together as a family, away from distractions." Emma didn't want to go. She had plans with friends' college applications to work on a part-time job at the local library. But I convinced her this was important, that it might be our last chance to heal the growing rift in our family. "Please, sweetheart," I begged. "Do this for me. Maybe if they see how wonderful you are away from all the stress, things will change." How wrong I was. The signs were there even before we left. Dolores called me the night before, her voice sharp with authority. "Make sure Emma packs appropriate clothes. None of those revealing outfits she likes to wear." Beverly texted me a list of rules for the trip, including Emma needs to show proper respect to her elders, and no talking back or attitude. I should have canceled the trip right then, but I was desperate to fix something that was already broken beyond repair. The morning we left for our camping trip, I woke up at 6 a.m. to pack supplies for everyone. Emma helped me load the coolers and camping gear into my SUV, though I could tell she was dreading the next 3 days. She'd chosen simple hiking clothes and sneakers, but when Dolores and Beverly arrived at 7 a.m., the criticism started immediately. "Is that what you're wearing?" Dolores asked Emma, looking her up and down with disapproval. Emma was wearing khaki shorts and a plain t-shirt, perfectly appropriate for desert camping, but nothing was ever good enough for my mother. "Yes, Grandma. Mom said to dress for hiking," Emma replied politely, but I caught the slight edge in her voice. Beverly joined in, shaking her head. "You'd think by 17 she'd know how to dress appropriately for a family trip." They spoke about Emma like she wasn't standing right there, and I watched my daughter's shoulders tense. The drive to the desert took 2 hours, and those were the longest 2 hours of my life. I drove while Dolores sat in the passenger seat, Beverly behind her, and Emma squeezed into the back corner. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Emma, you're awfully quiet back there," Beverly said about 30 minutes into the drive. "Aren't you excited about our family time together?" "I'm fine," Emma answered, simply staring out the window at the passing landscape. "Fine isn't an answer," Dolores snapped. "When adults speak to you, you should engage properly. This is exactly what I mean about respect." I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Emma's jaw clench. "I said I'm fine, Grandma. I'm just enjoying the scenery." "Don't take that tone with your grandmother," Beverly warned. "You need to adjust your attitude right now." That's when Emma finally snapped. "What tone?" I answered her question. "I said I'm fine. What more do you want from me?" Dolores turned around in her seat, her face red with anger. "That is exactly the kind of disrespectful behavior I'm talking about. You're being deliberately difficult." "I'm not being difficult," Emma protested, her voice rising slightly. "I just don't understand what I did wrong." "You never do," Beverly muttered. "That's the problem." I tried to intervene. "Everyone, let's just calm down. We're supposed to be enjoying this trip together." "Martha, this is exactly why Emma behaves this way," Dolores said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You never support us when we try to correct her behavior. You're too weak as a parent." The rest of the drive passed in uncomfortable silence, broken only by occasional disapproving sighs from Dolores and Beverly whenever Emma shifted in her seat or looked at her phone. We reached our campsite around 10 a.m. It was a remote area in the Sonoran Desert that Frank had discovered years ago, far from other campers and hiking trails. The temperature was already climbing toward 100 degrees, and the weather forecast predicted it would reach 115 degrees by midweek. As we unloaded the car, I explained the safety rules to everyone. "The desert is beautiful, but dangerous," I said, checking our water supplies. "We need to stay hydrated, avoid the sun during peak hours, and never wander off alone." Dolores waved off my concerns. "We're not children, Martha. We know how to take care of ourselves." But as we began setting up camp, every single thing Emma did was criticized. When she suggested placing our tents in a spot with more shade, Beverly rolled her eyes. "She's so picky. Can't she just adapt to any conditions?" When Emma offered to help organize our food supplies, Dolores pushed her aside. "I'll do it myself. You'll probably just make a mess." When Emma tried to help her grandmother with her tent, Dolores snapped, "I've been camping since before you were born. I don't need help from someone who's probably never spent a night outdoors in her life." I watched my daughter shrink a little more with each cruel comment, and my heart was breaking. This wasn't the healing family time I'd envisioned. This was systematic emotional abuse, and I was starting to realize it had been going on much longer than I'd wanted to admit. That first evening, as we sat around our campfire, Dolores began what she called sharing family stories. But really, it was a lecture about how children used to be raised properly and how different Emma was from me at her age. When Martha was 17, Dolores said, staring at Emma across the flames, "She would never have dreamed of talking back to me the way you do. She knew her place in the family." Beverly nodded enthusiastically. "Kids today just don't understand respect. They think they can say whatever they want without consequences." Emma listened for a while, poking at the fire with a stick, but I could see her frustration building. Finally, she looked up and said quietly, "I'm not my mom, and I don't need to live my life exactly the way she did. Times are different now." The silence that followed was deafening. Dolores's face went completely white, then flushed red with rage. "How dare you speak to me like that, you ungrateful little girl? Your mother has given you everything, and this is how you repay her, by being disrespectful to your elders." "I wasn't being disrespectful," Emma said, her voice shaking but determined. "I was just saying that I'm my own person." "You're a child," Beverly spat. You don't get to have opinions about how families should work. You do what you're told and show gratitude for everything that's been given to you. I tried to step in again. Let's all just take a breath here. Emma wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but Dolores turned on me with fury I'd never seen before. And there it is again, Martha. Every single time we try to teach this girl some manners, you undermine us. You're raising a monster and you're too blind to see it. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back and stood up. I'm going to bed, she said quietly, and walked to her tent without another word. As I watched my daughter retreat, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night air. Something was very wrong here, and it was getting worse by the hour. The second day started badly and got progressively worse. I woke up at dawn to check the weather forecast on my phone and my heart sank. The temperature was predicted to reach 115 degrees by afternoon, with no cloud cover and minimal wind. This was dangerous weather, the kind that killed unprepared hikers every year in Arizona. We should consider cutting the trip short, I told my family as we gathered for breakfast. This heat is going to be dangerous. Dolores looked at me with disgust. Martha, you worry about everything. We have water, we have shade, we'll be fine. Emma needs to learn that life isn't always comfortable. This isn't about comfort, Mom. This is about safety. People die in this kind of heat. People die because they're unprepared and weak, Beverly added, taking a sip of her coffee. Emma needs to toughen up. The real world isn't going to coddle her the way you do. Emma came out of her tent looking exhausted. She'd barely slept, and I could tell the constant criticism was wearing her down. But she tried to help with breakfast, organizing our supplies and checking our water reserves. That's when the incident happened that changed everything. Emma was refilling our water bottles from the large containers we'd brought when she accidentally knocked over Beverly's personal water bottle. It was a small plastic bottle, maybe 16 ounces, and it had been sitting on an uneven rock. The water spilled out onto the sandy ground and disappeared immediately. It was clearly an accident. Emma apologized immediately and repeatedly. I'm so sorry, Aunt Beverly. I didn't see it there. Let me refill it for you right away. But Dolores and Beverly reacted like Emma had committed a serious crime. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Dolores said, her voice cold and dangerous. Careless, irresponsible, wasteful. It was an accident, Emma protested, her voice small. Accidents happen because people aren't paying attention, Beverly snapped. You need to be more careful. Water is precious out here. I know that. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. But Dolores had made a decision that chilled me to the bone. Sorry isn't enough. You need to learn the value of water in the desert. You'll get reduced water rations for the rest of the trip. What? I stepped forward immediately. Absolutely not. That's dangerous. She needs to learn consequences for her actions. Beverly supported her mother. How else will she understand responsibility? She's 17 years old, and it's going to be 115 degrees today. I won't allow you to restrict her water. Dolores turned on me with a fury that made me step back. You won't allow Martha. You are the reason this girl has no discipline. You protect her from every consequence, and look what it's created. A spoiled, careless child who thinks she can do whatever she wants. She spilled water by accident, and now she'll learn not to be careless again. The argument escalated from there. Beverly joined in, telling me I was too weak to be a proper parent, and that Frank's death had somehow made me overprotective and irrational. When she brought up my deceased husband, something Emma had been quietly enduring, my daughter finally reached her breaking point. Don't you dare talk about my father, Emma said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it all trip. You have no right to bring him into this. He loved me, and he would never have treated me the way you two do. The silence that followed was terrifying. Dolores's face went through several shades of red before settling on a color I can only describe as murderous. How dare you, she whispered. How dare you speak to us like that? You ungrateful, disrespectful little brat." Beverly stood up, pointing at Emma. "That's it. You've crossed the line. You need to learn some serious lessons about respect and gratitude." I tried to diffuse the situation, but I could see something had shifted in my mother and sister. There was a look in their eyes I'd never seen before, something calculating and cruel. That night, after Emma had gone to bed early to escape the constant criticism, I overheard Dolores and Beverly talking in low voices outside their tent. "She needs to learn a lesson she'll never forget," Dolores was saying. "Something that will teach her the consequences of disrespect," Beverly agreed. "Something that will show her how good she's had it, how much she should appreciate what she's been given." I couldn't hear the rest of their conversation, but a cold dread settled in my stomach. I told myself they were just venting, just frustrated. I never imagined they would actually hurt Emma. The morning of the third day, I woke up to a temperature that was already climbing toward 110 degrees at 9 a.m. The forecast hadn't changed. We were looking at a potentially deadly day in the desert. "We're leaving," I announced as I started packing my gear. "This is too dangerous." "We're not leaving," Dolores said firmly. "Not until Emma learns her lesson." "What lesson? She's done nothing wrong." "She's been disrespectful and ungrateful this entire trip," Beverly added. "She needs to understand how good she has it." I saw them exchanging looks, and that cold dread in my stomach grew stronger. They were planning something, and every instinct I had as a mother was screaming danger. But I was too focused on protecting Emma from the immediate threat of the heat to pay attention to the larger threat sitting right in our campsite. While I went to refill our water containers and check our supplies, my mother and sister began quietly implementing a plan that would haunt me for the rest of my life. At 11 a.m., with the temperature already at 114 degrees and climbing, I left our campsite to walk to a nearby rock formation where I'd seen a natural spring on our first day. I wanted to fill all our water containers completely before the heat became unbearable. The walk would take me about 20 minutes round trip, and I told everyone where I was going. "I'll be right back," I called out as I gathered the empty water jugs. "Stay in the shade and keep drinking water." Emma was lying in her tent with the flap open, trying to create a cross breeze. Dolores and Beverly were sitting under our canopy, seemingly resting in the shade. Everything looked normal. I had no idea I was walking into a trap. When I returned 23 minutes later, my arms aching from carrying 40 pounds of water containers, I found our campsite empty. Emma's tent was still there exactly as I'd left it. Our camping chairs were in the same positions, but there were no people anywhere. At first I thought maybe they'd gone to explore nearby, though that would have been incredibly dangerous in this heat. I called out their names, my voice echoing off the desert rocks. "Emma, Mom, Beverly, where are you?" Silence. I walked around our campsite, panic beginning to build in my chest. Then I saw it. A piece of paper tucked under a rock on my camping chair, weighted down so the desert wind wouldn't take it. The handwriting was Beverly's, neat and careful. "Emma needs to learn how to be independent and appreciate what she has. We've gone back to town. She can think about her attitude out here for a while. Don't worry too much. We'll come back for her when she's learned her lesson." I read the note 3 times before the full horror of what they'd done hit me. They had left Emma alone in the desert, in 115-degree heat, with no water, no food, no phone, no way to call for help. My hands were shaking so hard, I could barely hold my phone as I dialed my mother's number. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice calm and casual. "Hello, Martha." "Where is Emma?" I screamed into the phone. "Where is my daughter?" "Emma is learning an important lesson about respect and gratitude," Dolores replied as if she were discussing the weather. "She's fine. She just needs some time to think about her behavior. You left her alone in the desert. It's 115 degrees. She has shade. She'll be fine. You baby her too much, Martha. Sometimes children need to experience real consequences for their actions." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Bring her back right now. Right now, or I'm calling the police." Beverly's voice came through the phone as she grabbed it from my mother. "Calm down, Martha. You're being dramatic. Emma just needs some space to think. She'll appreciate everything you've done for her once she realizes how good she's had it. She could die out here. She's not going to die. Stop being so hysterical. We'll come back for her in a few hours." The line went dead. I stared at my phone in complete shock. My mother and sister had abandoned my 17-year-old daughter in deadly desert heat as punishment for attitude, and they thought this was reasonable. But I didn't have time to process the full betrayal. Every minute Emma was out there alone was a minute closer to heat-stroke dehydration and death. I had to find her immediately. I started running through the desert, calling Emma's name at the top of my lungs. The sun was beating down mercilessly, and I could feel sweat pouring down my face and back. If I was struggling this much after just a few minutes, what was Emma going through? I searched in every direction from our campsite, following game trails and checking behind every large rock formation. The desert was vast and full of places where a scared teenager might try to find shelter. After an hour of searching, my voice was getting hoarse from shouting, and panic was threatening to overwhelm my ability to think clearly. Then I heard it. A faint voice calling Mom from somewhere to the east of our campsite. I ran toward the voice, stumbling over rocks and desert scrub, and found Emma about 3/4 of a mile from camp. She was huddled in the tiny shade of a large boulder, her face red from sun exposure, her lips already cracking from dehydration. She'd been crying, but her tears had dried up because her body didn't have enough water to produce them anymore. "Mom," she whispered when she saw me. "I thought no one was coming back for me." I dropped to my knees beside her and pulled her into my arms. Her skin was burning hot to the touch, and she was showing early signs of heat exhaustion. I immediately gave her small sips of water from my bottle, not too much at once because I knew her body might reject it if she was too dehydrated. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. I found you." "Where did they go?" Emma asked, her voice weak and confused. "Grandma and Aunt Beverly just told me to walk with them, and then they said they were going back to get something from camp, but they never came back. I waited and waited, and then I tried to find my way back, but everything looks the same out here." The full picture of what they'd done became clear. They hadn't just left her at camp. They deliberately led her away from our campsite, away from water and shelter, and abandoned her in the open desert. This wasn't just cruel punishment. This was attempted murder. Getting Emma back to our campsite in that heat while she was weak from dehydration was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I had to support most of her weight while walking across uneven terrain with no shade. Every few minutes I'd stop to give her more water and check her condition. By the time we reached camp, Emma was barely conscious. I loaded her immediately into our air-conditioned car and drove as fast as I safely could toward Phoenix, calling ahead to the emergency room where I worked. "This is Martha Collins. I'm bringing my 17-year-old daughter in for severe heat exhaustion and dehydration. ETA 30 minutes. The emergency room doctor who treated Emma was someone I'd worked with for years. After running tests and getting Emma stabilized with IV fluids, he pulled me aside. "Martha, if you'd found her 30 minutes later, we might have been looking at kidney failure. Another hour, and this could have been fatal. What happened out there?" I told him the truth, all of it. And as I spoke, I watched his expression change from concern to shock to complete horror. "Your mother and sister did this deliberately. They left her alone in the desert as punishment." "Yes. Martha, this isn't family drama. This is child endangerment. This is attempted murder." As I sat beside Emma's hospital bed watching IV fluids slowly bring color back to her face, I made a decision. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg my family for apologies or explanations. I was going to destroy them. While Emma slept in her hospital bed, recovering from the dehydration and heat exhaustion my family had deliberately inflicted on her, I stepped out into the hallway and made the first of several phone calls that would change our lives forever. But I didn't call to scream at my mother and sister. I called to gather evidence, I dialed my mother's number and put the call on speaker, positioning my phone next to a digital recorder I'd borrowed from the hospital's patient services department. "Hi, Mom," I said, keeping my voice calm and neutral. "Martha, thank goodness. How is Emma? Is she being dramatic about her little adventure? Tell me exactly what you did today." "We taught her a lesson she needed to learn. Emma has been disrespectful and ungrateful this entire trip. We simply gave her some time to think about her attitude and appreciate everything she has. You left her alone in the desert. We left her somewhere safe so she could reflect on her behavior. You've coddled that girl her entire life, Martha. Sometimes children need to face real consequences. It was 115 degrees. She had shade. She wasn't in any real danger. You're being overly dramatic as usual." Every word was being recorded. Every callous, unrepentant sentence was evidence of their complete lack of remorse or understanding of what they'd done. I called Beverly next. "Oh, good you found her," Beverly said when she answered. "Is she ready to apologize for her attitude?" "Apologize? For being disrespectful to Mom and me. For taking you for granted. For acting like a spoiled brat this entire trip. Beverly, you left her alone in the desert to die." "Don't be so dramatic, Martha. She wasn't going to die. She just needed to learn what it feels like to not have everything handed to her. Maybe now she'll appreciate what a good mother you've been instead of acting like the world owes her something." "She's in the hospital." "Well, I'm sure she's milking it for all the attention she can get. That's exactly the kind of manipulative behavior I'm talking about." I hung up and stared at the recording device. Both of my family members had just confessed on tape to deliberately abandoning Emma in life-threatening conditions, and neither of them showed a shred of remorse. My next call was to the police. "I need to report a case of child endangerment and abandonment." I told the desk sergeant at the Phoenix Police Department. Officer Rodriguez arrived at the hospital an hour later. He was a father of 3, and as I played him the recordings and showed him the medical report detailing Emma's condition, I watched his jaw clench with anger. "Mrs. Collins, what your mother and sister did constitutes child endangerment in the first degree. Given the extreme conditions and the deliberate nature of their actions, the district attorney will likely pursue serious felony charges." Good. My next call was to Sarah Martinez, a family law attorney I'd met through work. She'd handled several cases involving family abuse and had been recommended by colleagues. "Sarah, I need to file for a restraining order and explore civil charges against my mother and sister for what they did to Emma." When I explained the situation, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Martha, I've been practicing family law for 15 years, and this is one of the most shocking cases of family abuse I've ever heard. We're going to pursue this aggressively." While I was making these calls, word had gotten around the hospital about what happened. My colleagues, doctors, and nurses I'd worked with for years were stopping by Emma's room to check on her and offer support. Dr. Peterson, the head of emergency medicine, pulled me aside. "Martha, I want you to know that everyone here supports you completely. What your family did was unconscionable. If you need time off, if you need anything at all, just ask." But it was my friend Janet, a nurse practitioner, who'd been trying to get me to cut ties with my toxic family for years, who said what I needed to hear most. "I'm proud of you for finally seeing them for what they are," she said quietly. "You've been making excuses for their abuse for too long. Emma deserves better, and so do you." That night, as Emma slept peacefully under medical supervision, I sat in the chair beside her bed and planned my next moves. I wasn't going to let emotion drive my decisions. I was going to be strategic, methodical, and relentless. I changed our home security codes and called our landlord to add my mother and sister to the list of people who were not allowed on the property under any circumstances. I contacted Emma's school and informed them that her grandmother and aunt were no longer authorized to pick her up or make decisions regarding her education or medical care. I called my bank and removed both Dolores and Beverly from my emergency contact list, replacing them with Janet and Dr. Peterson. Most importantly, I called Emma's therapist and scheduled an emergency session for the following day. Emma was going to need professional help processing this betrayal, and I wanted her to have every resource available. Around midnight, my phone started ringing. It was Dolores. "Martha, we need to talk about this situation. You're blowing everything out of proportion." "The police will be arresting you tomorrow," I said calmly. "I suggest you hire a lawyer." "Arresting us for what?" "Child endangerment, child abandonment, reckless endangerment. The district attorney is reviewing the case for additional charges." For the first time, I heard uncertainty in my mother's voice. "Martha, you can't be serious. We're family. Family doesn't try to kill each other's children. We didn't try to kill anyone. We were teaching her a lesson. You left her to die in the desert." Beverly grabbed the phone. "You're being completely irrational, Martha. Call off the police and we can work this out as a family." "There is no family anymore," I said, and hung up. I turned off my phone and sat in the quiet hospital room, listening to Emma's steady breathing. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I'd finally chosen my daughter over the people who'd been slowly poisoning our lives with their cruelty and manipulation. Emma was going to recover, and I was going to make sure that no one ever hurt her like this again. The arrests happened exactly as I'd promised. 2 days after Emma was released from the hospital, Officer Rodriguez called to tell me that Dolores and Beverly had been taken into custody. Both were charged with child endangerment in the first-degree child abandonment and reckless endangerment. The recordings I'd made were played for the district attorney, who decided to pursue the case aggressively. Mrs. Collins, D.A. Williams, told me during our meeting, "Your mother and sister showed a callous disregard for your daughter's life. They need to face serious consequences for their actions." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, I focused on Emma's recovery and our new life without toxic family members. Emma surprised me with her resilience. After her initial therapy session, she told me something that broke my heart and made me proud at the same time. "Mom, I'm actually relieved," she said as we sat in our living room, safe and air-conditioned and together. "I know it sounds terrible, but I've been afraid of Grandma and Aunt Beverly for years. I just never told you because I knew you wanted us all to get along. You should have told me, sweetheart. I tried to in little ways, but they were always so good at making it seem like I was the problem. Like I was too sensitive or disrespectful or ungrateful." We talked for hours about the years of psychological abuse Emma had endured, the constant criticism and belittling disguised as guidance and family love. I realized that my attempts to keep our family together had actually enabled my mother and sister to torment my daughter. "I should have protected you better," I told her. "You protected me when it mattered most," Emma replied. "You chose me over them. That's what matters now." The preliminary hearing was a nightmare for Dolores and Beverly, but a vindication for Emma and me. The judge listened to the recordings, reviewed the medical reports, and heard testimony from the emergency room doctor who'd treated Emma. When Dolores took the stand in her own defense, she made everything worse. "Your Honor, I was trying to teach my granddaughter about respect and gratitude," she said, showing no remorse. "Today's children are spoiled and entitled. Sometimes they need to experience hardship to appreciate what they have." "Mrs. Henderson," the judge replied, his voice cold with disgust, "you left a 17-year-old girl alone in deadly desert conditions as punishment for what you perceived as attitude problems. There is no justification for endangering a child's life." Beverly's testimony was equally damaging to their case. She continued to insist that Emma needed to learn a lesson, and that I was overreacting to the situation. The defense attorney tried to argue that they hadn't intended to seriously harm Emma, but the recordings made it clear that they'd planned the abandonment in advance and showed no concern for her safety. Both women were found guilty on all charges. Dolores was sentenced to 2 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months. Beverly received 18 months with the possibility of parole after 1 year. Both were ordered to pay for Emma's medical expenses and therapy costs, and both received 5-year restraining orders prohibiting them from contacting Emma or me. The civil case was even more straightforward. Sarah Martinez presented evidence of the psychological damage Emma had suffered, the medical expenses from her hospitalization, and the ongoing therapy costs. The jury awarded us a substantial settlement that would cover Emma's college expenses and provide for her future. But more important than the money was the validation. 12 strangers had listened to our story and confirmed what I'd finally realized. What my mother and sister had done was not family discipline or tough love. It was abuse, plain and simple. The day the civil trial ended, Emma and I drove home in comfortable silence. As we pulled into our driveway, she said something that made me realize how much we'd both grown through this ordeal. "Mom, I know this whole thing has been terrible, but I feel stronger now. Like I finally understand that their opinion of me never mattered. What matters is that I know who I am, and I know you love me exactly as I am." That night we ordered pizza and watched old movies, just the two of us. No criticism, no walking on eggshells, no wondering what mood the other adults in our lives would be in. Just peace. Over the following months, something beautiful happened. Without the constant stress and negativity of Dolores and Beverly in our lives, Emma blossomed. Her grades improved even more. She made new friends and she started volunteering at a local organization that helped teenagers from abusive families. "I want to help other kids who are going through what I went through," she told me. "I want them to know it's not their fault and that there are people who will believe them and protect them." I was so proud of her, I could barely speak. We also developed new family traditions with people who actually cared about us. Janet became like a sister to me, and her family included us in their holidays and celebrations. Dr. Peterson and his wife became mentors to Emma, encouraging her pre-med studies and helping her prepare for college applications. We learned that family isn't about blood relations. Family is about love, support, protection, and genuine care for each other's well-being. The people who tried to destroy Emma in the desert weren't family. They were predators who happened to share our DNA. It's been a year since that nightmare in the desert, and I want to tell you how our story ends, because healing is possible even after the worst betrayals. Emma is now 18 and thriving in her senior year of high school. She was accepted early admission to Arizona State University's pre-med program with a full scholarship funded partially by our civil settlement. But more importantly, she's become an incredibly strong, confident young woman who knows her own worth. She speaks at local high schools now about recognizing family abuse and the importance of setting healthy boundaries. "Just because someone is related to you doesn't mean they have the right to treat you badly," she tells students. "Real family lifts you up, doesn't tear you down." Emma never asks about her grandmother or aunt, and she's never expressed any desire to reconcile with them. "They showed me who they really are," she says simply. "I believe them. As for me, I learned the hardest lesson a parent can learn sometimes. Protecting your child means cutting off your own family. For years, I'd been so focused on keeping everyone happy that I'd failed to see how miserable my daughter was. I'd prioritized my mother's feelings over my child's safety and well-being. Dolores and Beverly have never apologized. Even after serving their time, they continue to maintain that they were trying to help Emma learn respect and gratitude. They've attempted to contact us through other family members, but we've made it clear that we have no interest in rebuilding relationships with people who tried to kill my daughter. Some extended family members have criticized me for being too harsh and breaking up the family. To them, I say the family was already broken. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. Emma and I have built a new life surrounded by people who genuinely love and support us. We have friends who celebrate our successes and help us through difficult times. We have colleagues and mentors who believe in our goals and help us achieve them. We have a chosen family that's stronger than any blood relationship ever was. The most important thing I learned is that love isn't about tolerance and endurance. Love is about protection and empowerment. Real love doesn't ask you to accept abuse for the sake of keeping peace. Real love fights for your safety and happiness. I also learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to shout back. Instead of engaging in drama and arguments, I took action. I gathered evidence, involved authorities, and removed the threats from our lives. Quiet determination was more powerful than any screaming match could have been. Emma recently told me something that confirmed I'd made the right choice. Mom, for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of family gatherings or worried about saying the wrong thing. I can just be myself and know that I'm loved and accepted exactly as I am. That's what family should feel like. Safe, supportive, unconditionally loving. To anyone listening who might be in a similar situation, please understand this. You don't owe toxic people access to your life just because you share DNA. You don't have to endure abuse for the sake of family unity. And you definitely don't have to sacrifice your children's well-being to maintain relationships with people who don't deserve them. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is walk away from people who claim to love you, but consistently treat you badly. Sometimes protecting the people you love means disappointing the people who don't. Emma and I are living proof that families can heal and thrive after cutting out toxic members. We're happier, healthier, and closer than we've ever been. We wake up each day knowing we're safe, valued, and genuinely loved. That's worth more than any family reunion or holiday gathering with people who see us as problems to be fixed rather than people to be cherished. I want to leave you with this question. If someone in your family treated a stranger's child the way they treat your child, would you still defend them? Would you still make excuses for them? If the answer is no, then maybe it's time to reconsider what kind of access these people should have to your family. Your children are watching how you respond when they're mistreated. They're learning what they should accept in relationships based on what you accept. Choose wisely because their future happiness and safety depend on the boundaries you set today. What would you do if you found yourself in a similar situation? Would you have the courage to choose your child over family pressure? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more real stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building healthier relationships. And please share this with anyone who might need to hear that they have the right to protect themselves and their children from toxic family members, no matter who those people are. Thank you for listening to our story. And remember, you deserve to be surrounded by people who truly love and support you. Don't settle for anything less.